Mobility is at the core of all we do and all that we aspire to behold. And in a world that is constantly changing, we have adapted to meet our needs. But with the aspiration to bring the world closer, we may have gone too far. Our spiraling demands to fuel all that moves us has damaged the very systems that sustain us. But we can step on the brakes and change course while still moving forward to create a safe and habitable world. We need innovative solutions for these emerging challenges. Technologies for sustainable mobility exist. We have made them, and they are now ready to be deployed to those who need them most. In India, the Shoonya campaign has supercharged ride-hailing and deliveries by using electric vehicles, aiming to improve air quality across the country and reduce CO2 emissions from the transport sector. Clean and efficient vehicles powered by the sun are taking to the streets in Africa. And in the island nations of the Caribbean, electric buses are providing clean, resilient, and affordable transport to citizens. Together, these solutions are key to solving the most pressing challenge of our time, while ensuring prosperity for communities that might otherwise have been left behind. The answers are here, but they need to be scaled. We are at the last mile. It is time to move.
Namaskar, Salam Alaikum, and welcome to the special event, Electric Mobility for All, here at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Vindhya Tripathi. I'm a Senior Director at RMI, and I'm delighted to serve as your moderator for today's convening. The global e-mobility transition is underway. New technologies and service models are driving the adoption of EVs at an accelerated pace around the world. The solutions to electrifying transport differ across geographies. And while there is no one-size-fits-all approach, there are projects and proven policy levers to encourage adoption of clean, efficient transport. To decarbonize this sector rapidly, it is critical to prioritize the electrification of affordable and accessible modes of transport that are utilized by billions living in the global south and in the global north. From 2- and 3-wheelers to buses for mass transit, urban freight carriers, and ride-hailing vehicles, the ecosystem is ripe for electrification and offers one of the most tangible routes to achieving the ambitious climate goals that are necessary and also desired by all. In today's convening, we are delighted to have representatives from government, from industry, and from civil society share their views on what is required to accelerate an equitable and inclusive transition to clean mobility around the world. Without further delay, to deliver the welcome remarks, it is my pleasure to invite, from the United Nations Environment Programme, Senior Program Management Officer and Global Coordinator on Climate Change, Nicholas Hagelberg. Please come, sir.
Thank you, Vindhya, and it's a great pleasure to be here with you today, and I guess welcome also to the event, as that's part of my task. Just a couple of weeks ago, we released the emission gap report, and frankly, the news are not really good. Absolutely, at best, we could deliver a 1.8 degree world, but that would require 100% implementation of the NDCs and 100% implementation of the net zero targets. So that's quite a tall order for governments and frankly almost any organization in the world. So with current trends, we are still heading for a 3 degree warmer world. And to address that, that's an additional effect that we chose to bring in here. So, to address so that we're not going for 3 degrees, we're going to have progress across all sectors: energy, industry, transport, forestry, agriculture, buildings and construction. And with transport, if we don't get progress in the sector, it's not sufficient that we have progress in the others. So all of those sectors need to move. And it's the sector with the fastest growing emissions, and by 2050 you're probably aware that there is estimates that it would account for 1/3 of emissions. So we need a true transition in the sector, and this transition is ongoing already in some areas. So you may know that in Norway already 90% of the new vehicles being sold are electric. But out of the 1 billion cars and vehicles that are coming on the roads, 2/3 of those are in the developing world. So there are 3 things that we need to do across the world. This is now across the world. We need to avoid emissions from the sector. So this is urban area design. This is supporting, for example, active mobility, walking and biking. It's the shift from carbon-intensive mobility, so for example, moving over to public transportation, and then it's improved, so moving from internal combustion engines to electric vehicles. And if we then drill down into the 4 challenges in the global south, then that's where the money is not quite available for countries and governments to support the transition to electric vehicle, the purchase of electric vehicles, or putting in place the the charging infrastructure. So there's 4 things that we believe are key in developing countries. It's building the awareness. There's still a long way before this is something that is around dinner tables and being discussed in communities and so on. There's plenty of room for improvements on policy and standards. So there's very few countries that actually have advanced vehicle policies in place. In most low and middle income countries, there is still a shortage of the products, the just access to electric vehicles, whether those are 2, 3 or 4-wheelers. And then finally, the finance is a stumbling block. So where do we get the finance for purchasing those vehicles, but also installing infrastructure and the whole support part for it. So that's where UNEP's Global Electric Mobility Program comes in. In our support to some 50 countries in low and middle income countries, we're trying to address those very things. And a couple of examples where we're working is in Philippines on electric 3-wheelers, with for example, shifting the whole postal service over to electric 3-wheelers, electrification of the bus fleet in Seychelles, and also a full electric bus program in Chile. In our mobility program, we're also helping countries put in place those policies and strategies, and quite a bit of this is actually working with the partners that partly we can see in this room here. So the good news with all of this is that most of the developing world have actually really good, the energy mix is really high, like Kenya, where I currently live. It's 92% of the energy mix is already renewable. So it's a very fertile ground for shifting to electric mobility. And the choice may seem very simple, and it's a good opportunity for leapfrogging. Like in Kenya, we never went for landlines, we went for smartphones immediately. Now everybody has one. It can be very quick, that transition, if we get the finance, the policies, and the collaboration together. So Vindhya, with that one, I would like to hand back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. No, you can take a seat there and then we'll call you up later. Thank you. Moving now to India, my home country, where both national and subnational governments are implementing bold policies which are supporting industry and also helping citizens access clean mobility. We are delighted to have join us today two champions of India's electric mobility transition. I will begin first by introducing from the government of Maharashtra, one of the leaders at the forefront of the state's electric mobility efforts, the Additional Chief Commissioner of Finance, Mr. Ashish Kumar Singh. Welcome, sir. Thank you so much for joining us today. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed a pleasure today to be here in this session on electric mobility for all. Our Honorable Prime Minister, Shri Modi, in COP26, had announced net zero by 2070. One of the lowest hanging fruits would be the transport sector. And keeping that in mind, we in Maharashtra have formulated our electric vehicle policy in 2021. As you know, road transport is key to ensuring India's continued economic growth. Fulfilling our rising vehicle demand and serving the economic activities using internal combustion engine vehicles will worsen air pollution, which already is causing tremendous amount of alarm across the country. This would derail our fight against climate change without any doubt. To ensure that we reduce these negative externalities, we have decided to spearhead the transition to clean transport by bringing in electric vehicles across the state of Maharashtra. In our new policy announced in 2021, we aim to spur the adoption of battery electric vehicles such that it contributes to at least 10% of all new vehicle registrations by 2025. Now, as you know, India is already on the cusp of a demographic explosion. And so a 10% contribution of electric vehicles to the total registrations would be really significant. We also intend to ensure that local manufacturing of EVs, batteries, and other components in the state are incentivized so that there is enough ecosystem available for people to adopt electric vehicles. We intend to emerge as India's top producer of battery electric vehicles in terms of annual production capacity and have set targets for the establishment of at least 1 gigawatt factory for manufacturing advanced chemistry cells, batteries. To facilitate innovation and serve the need for a skilled workforce, we are focusing on promoting research and development, innovation, and skill development across the entire EV ecosystem in the state. The state has also announced extremely lucrative fiscal and non-fiscal incentives to drive EV adoption. The EV revolution, as has been already stated, is here to stay, and it is changing the way the automotive industry operates today. We do know that the EV value chain differs from the ICE vehicles. Maharashtra has been the hub of all the ICE automobiles in the country, and to move EV would be quite a change. But yet, because we already are an auto hub, it would be rather easy for us to move on to the EV value chain. The change in the vehicle's components will impact all the component manufacturers, suppliers, and after-sales service providers. And understanding this, we need to actually build the entire ecosystem as quickly as we can. This will not only reduce the demand for fuel, but it will also increase the demand for electricity. And that is where we'll have to kind of do a trade-off between the generation that we'll have from coal-based electricity vis-a-vis moving over to greener sources of energy. As we transition from ICE to EVs, it should also be viewed as a technological transformation and at the same time, a socio-economic and environmental transformation. The government of Maharashtra is focused on facilitating a just and equitable transition to electric mobility, creating jobs, improving livelihoods, and improving the standards of living of the people of the state. Thus, we have a very ambitious plan for reskilling and training the existing and upcoming workforce, which can help create newer opportunities in the automotive sector and minimize any impact on job losses. Localization of the EV value chain is a measure that can help mitigate adverse impacts on jobs and secure supply chains from geopolitical risks. Hence, with this objective, our policy is focused on increasing the manufacturing of EVs and ACC batteries in the state. We also need to generate enough information, awareness, facilitate dialogues, and enable partnerships to minimize the socio-economic and environmental impact of the electric mobility transition itself. At this moment, we would like to call on the industry to play a vital role in enabling a just transition. The industry can strengthen social and economic security, as well as the occupational health and safety of the workforce. As the industry is directly connected to its workforce and associated communities, it can also help communities transition in a just manner. The government at the subnational level, as well as at the national level, is all geared up to champion and embrace the justice in policy making and decision making. Government is also keen to direct industry to include a justice lens while planning for the EV mobility transition. The e-mobility transition is bound to happen whether we like it or not, and therefore it is essential that we have a dialogue with all the stakeholders, keep people at the center, and minimize the impacts of this transition, which will be critical for India to be able to create a just and equitable transition. I hope that today we will be able to not only debate and discuss the electric vehicle movement across the world, and particularly in India and Maharashtra, but also ensure that we are able to create decent jobs and better livelihoods for our people and for the planet overall. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much, sir, for speaking with our audience here today, and we look forward to meeting you in Mumbai on our next visit. Thank you. Next, I'd like to invite from Niti Aayog, the Director of E-Mobility from the Government of India, to speak about a very special initiative that was launched a year ago and has had tremendous success, the Shoonya campaign. Please welcome Mr. Randhir Singh. Randhir ji.
Thank you, Vindhya. I hope I am audible.
You're audible, sir.
Thank you very much. And thank you for having me here. You know, Sir has already spoken a lot about the India's transformation journey. So India's transportation sector currently contributes around 13% of its total CO2 emissions. With rising population, income levels, mobility demand, economic activity, the transportation sector emissions are expected to increase rapidly. Meeting this demand through internal combustion engines vehicles will be polluting, unhealthy, and expensive electrification. So electrification is the one of the solutions of the alternate sources, and it will have a huge impact on the oil saving, on the import bill of our country, and also reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. It will also help to improve the air quality through the zero emission vehicles and provide associated health benefits. Technological advancements and the policy interventions in vehicle adoption across the globe, including India. India has on transformative mobility at the national level. This is further supplemented by the EV policies at the state level, with the production-linked incentive schemes for manufacturing ACC advanced chemistry cells and the PLI scheme for automobile and the auto components. India's vision is to emerge as an EV and advanced chemistry cell manufacturing hub. However, there is still a lack of awareness amongst consumers regarding EVs, charging infrastructure, and associated government schemes and incentives. To overcome this barrier, Niti Aayog launched the Shoonya Zero Pollution Mobility campaign in September 2021. Shoonya campaign focuses on enhancing awareness around EVs by highlighting the health, environmental, and economic benefits of EVs. To scale consumer awareness, Niti Aayog has partnered with Government of India's citizen engagement platform MyGov. MyGov has more than
I do apologize. There's been quite a lot of technical difficulties. I think there's an overload on the internet services. So I'm really very sad that we couldn't hear Randirji speak more in-depthly on the Shoonya campaign, which has had so much success, 130 corporate partners, and really has accelerated an e-mobility ecosystem in India. So apologies for that, but that's what happens when you're in a live show. So back to the present and to our panelists who are here with us today. I'd now like to invite to share expert views from the perspective of civil society, the CEO from the Institute for Transportation and Development Policy, Heather Thompson, all yours.
Thank you. And is there a clicker somewhere? Thank you. Well, it's a pleasure to be with all of you here today, live and in the room. Hopefully, I will be able to communicate clearly. We won't have any technical glitches. So again, my name is Heather Thompson, and I am the CEO of the Institute for Transportation and Development Policy, ITDP. Let me see if I can work this. Clicking all, oops, there we go. I think it was that one. All right, oops. Well, the format of my slides is a little bit messed up, but we can deal with that, right? At least you can hear me. So the Institute for Transportation and Development Policy, for those of you that don't know us, are a civil society organization with more than 35 years of history working around the world. We're headquartered in New York City, which is where I'm based, but we have offices all over the world staffed by locals, including in India, where we've done a lot of work with RMI and other partners, but offices in China, in India, in Indonesia, here in Africa, with offices in East Africa, here in Cairo, in Egypt as well as Brazil and Mexico. And we work on supporting cities, states, and nations in advancing sustainable transportation and urban planning. So today, I want to share with you, hopefully. There we go. Oops. There we go. All right. So I want to share with you a study that we actually released last year, just at the COP, and it's gotten a lot of traction in the last year. And it's what we call the Compact Cities Scenario Electrified Report. And it's the fourth in a series of reports that we've done in partnership with University California, Davis, looking at what it will require to actually meet our climate targets, what it will take in the sustainable transportation sector. So the last that we did was in the year 2021, as I said, just last year. And this was done in partnership, again, with UC Davis, but with review from many partners around the world who all agree on the conclusions. And the conclusions being, we were really excited to see, as we were talking about today, the uptake of electric mobility. And as the former speaker said, the electric mobility revolution is here. There's nothing that we can deny about that. It's great for our sector. We absolutely need to get fossil fuels out of the transportation sector. But in the run-up to Glasgow last year, we saw that there was so much attention on electrification, and we know that it's not the only solution in transportation. We need a much more holistic picture, as was mentioned during the introduction remarks. So what you see here in the middle is kind of our budget to stay within a 1.5 degree scenario. That's that black circle in the middle. And so what we did was we modeled what would happen if we just focus on electrification, what would happen if we just focus on shifting people out of vehicles, so focusing more on public transportation, walking, cycling, compact city development, and what happens if we focus on those things together? And what we found out is if we focus on just those two strategies alone, we do not get to our 1.5 degree target. It's only when we focus on those things together that we actually get to the Paris Protocol agreement that we're all trying to achieve. Of course, if we're at business as usual, which is the red section of the pie, we far below that carbon budget. So we don't want business as usual. We want to be in this bottom right-hand corner where we're focusing on electrification, walking, cycling, and compact development. Essentially what that means is we want to keep the number of private vehicles on the road to a minimum and electrify the rest. And so again, this is a different picture of the same thing that you just saw in that schematic. The blue area here is the area that we need to be in if we want to keep to our 1.5 degree target. The red line is business as usual. If we just focus on the high shift only, that's the orange line. In the middle, if we focus on yellow alone, that's electrification. Again, we don't get there. It's only when we focus on them together that we actually stay within our carbon budget. So this doesn't mean we don't want people to continue traveling. We want people to have access to all of the things that they do normally within transportation. We just want to shift people out of either growing their vehicles, which many countries now, as we all know, car adoption is really on the rise, which is why transportation emissions are growing so quickly. So we want to try and slow that down. And we want to shift people out of vehicles into public transportation, walking and cycling. We know that that doesn't happen unless those conditions are favorable. So we want to make sure that public transportation is clean and green, it's frequent. You know when the bus or the train is showing up, it's going to show up, you get on, you feel safe, you feel secure, you know how to pay for your fares. We have to make sure that the conditions are right. Same thing with walking and cycling. We need to make sure that there's ample place to ride a bicycle on protected bicycle lanes. Similarly, that we're walking down the street, we can walk down the street with ample place. There's a lot of shade. That's something that we see here outside in Sharm el-Sheikh, right? There's areas where there's great walking areas, but there's not enough shade and there's nobody walking. But where we see areas where there's lots of shade, where there's lots of stores, people are walking. So if you build it right, they will come. So again, you can sort of see here in all of the colored rainbow charts, we want to get to that area all the way to the right where we have a much better mix of different uses and minimum people in actual private vehicles. There's more benefits to this than just transportation. One of the biggest benefits is by really focusing our resources on public transportation, it saves the world money. And we know right now a lot of countries are struggling in post-COVID times with economics and development for their people. So if we focus on this strategy and really a focus on electrification of buses in particular, it means we're focusing our resources for the electrification that serves the most people, and it can save us $5 trillion annually by 2050. And the gap that is said to exist right now is $10 trillion in the transportation sector by 2040. So if we focus on this, we can actually close that financing gap. The other benefit of this is it reduces the demand for energy, and it was mentioned in the earlier comments that many countries have the benefit of having clean, renewable energy, but many countries do not. Many countries are still running on coal-based energy, which we all know is one of the major fossil fuel tragedies of the world. So we need to do all that we can to reduce the demand on the electricity sector, essentially lowering the burden for us as a climate community, so that we don't have to do as much renewable energy. We know that getting to clean grids takes time, it takes money, and we know our climate challenge is urgent, so we really don't have time. So again, by concentrating our resources in electrification on public transportation, we can save 40% in electricity demand. This just gives you a picture of what happens if we actually don't meet our renewable energy targets. So all of this modeling is really interesting because it not only looks at the emissions that are coming out of the tailpipes from cars, it also looks at the emissions that goes into building roads and the manufacturing of vehicles, and it looks at the emissions that go into the renewable energy, into the grid. So if we don't actually get to our renewable energy goals, we have an even more difficult time getting to our goals. So all of this is with an assumption that we're really working hand in hand with the electricity sector as well. So again, these roadmaps, this particular study has been so popular over the last year that we've decided to take this global picture and break it down into regional roadmaps, country-based roadmaps. So those roadmaps will be rolling out over the next months and next year, and we're going to be excited to release those soon next year. One of the first roadmaps at the country level that we decided to do was here for Egypt, knowing that the COP was here. And we found that the results are pretty astonishing. So the assumptions do include the life cycle emissions. So it does include the emissions of building the roads and manufacturing the vehicles. It also assumes rapid decarbonization of our grid. So we're assuming renewable energy comes on as quickly as possible based on some of the priorities and commitments that are planned for the Egyptian government. But even within that, with those assumptions, you see that the yellow line, which is the line where we're electrifying and focusing on public transportation, walking and cycling, the yellow line is not even within our 1.5 degree scenario. So this was a real astonishing result for us to see that even if we do all of those things for Egypt alone, we're not going to get to the 1.5 degree target. So that means we really have to focus on all of those things together. We can't just assume electrification is going to be the magic wand that solves the problem. And with that, as a picture of the globe, please stay tuned for those regional roadmaps that are coming out. We're doing, I probably won't get the full list right, but China, India, the US, Indonesia, South Africa, Egypt. I think we're doing one for Africa region as a whole, as well as North Africa. So please stay tuned for those. And our hopes is that those also break down into targets for investment in kilometers of bus lanes, number of e-buses, number of kilometers of bike lanes. So those sorts of targets can be used to influence policy, both at the national level and at the international. So thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Heather, and I'm definitely very keen to see the India roadmap because that's obviously a huge sector and a huge basket of emissions. So thank you so much. Up next, I would like to invite from General Motors Chief Sustainability Officer, Kristen Seaman, to give us the perspective of industry as to what needs to happen.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me here today. And I think it's another sign of how important it is for public and private sectors to work together to really make this transition a reality. So at General Motors, we've set some pretty bold commitments. In fact, back in 2017, we set a vision of a world with zero crashes, zero emissions, and zero congestion. And we've been putting policies and practices and products in place to really achieve that. Last year in January of 2021, we set some big goals around being carbon neutral in our products and operations by 2040 and to eliminate tailpipe emissions from light-duty U.S. vehicles by 2035. Both of those are also based on science-based targets, which is very important to us as a technology company. We feel it's very important to set ambitious goals, but also goals that can be backed by reality and by science. We also have a number of other sustainability goals and commitments. One that we're very proud of and was talked about a little bit here is around renewable energy. And we set, actually back in 2016, a goal to be 100% renewable energy in all of our operations by 2050. With a lot of work, looking at data, et cetera, we actually were able to accelerate that goal and just announced about a week and a half ago that in the US we have reached all of our commitments to be there by 2025. So well ahead of schedule. Actually, as one of a coworker told me, said you skipped a generation. So I think it's just another great sign of if you set an ambitious goal and really keep working towards it, it's possible to get there even faster. We've got a number of initiatives. I could talk here all day about product. Certainly a pride point for us, but probably most important is one of the things that we really believe is that this transition to an all-electric future needs to be equitable, and it needs to be inclusive. It needs to make sure that communities that have been disproportionately affected by climate change aren't left behind. So we have a strong focus on equitable climate action. It's kind of 4 parts. The first is on the future of work and making sure that we bring our current workforce along with us. We believe our workforce, our people, are our greatest asset. And that is certainly keen in our manufacturing plants. You know, we've been manufacturing vehicles for well over 100 years. That built-in quality and safety that's in our facilities and in our people and the culture and the pride they have in putting those vehicles together, you can't create that overnight. And so a lot of discussion over the transition to electric and be new. In reality, 80% of the vehicle between an ICE and an EV is the same. And so that culture and that passion around the vehicle is something that we're very proud of and is part of our future. We've also really been looking at the jobs and the qualifications of certain positions. Traditionally, many jobs required a 4-year degree. In reality, as we really look and deeply analyze it, many positions require leadership, and you can get leadership in many ways. It's not always just getting a piece of paper that says you went to a university. So a lot of work and future insight into how we make that a much more inclusive future. The second area is around EV access. When we talk about having products across every price point and segment, it's not just about personal mobility. We're doing a lot in deliveries with our Bright Drop technology, so electric vans that are being used by some of the biggest companies in the world, FedEx, Walmart, Verizon, et cetera, that are really making a difference in communities well beyond just the personal mobility, as well as ride shares with our cruise technology. So a lot happening in that space. The third area is around charging infrastructure. In fact, it's an area that we've partnered very strongly with RMI on to make sure that charging is available for all communities and that no community is left behind, including multi-dwelling homes, et cetera. So we've done a lot on our own with investing in charging infrastructure. GM's committed over $750 million to implement charging stations across the U.S. and others, but that won't be enough. We know we can't do it by ourselves, and so working together with organizations and governments, et cetera. And then the last area is, again, where we've partnered with RMI is we've issued a climate equity fund. So we originally committed $25 million. Recently, last year, doubled that to $50 million, where we're investing in providing grants to organizations and community grassroots organizations that are really looking for those solutions to be able to make this all EV future inclusive. So it's everything from eliminating charging deserts to there's organization out in California that is training technicians on how to work on EVs. There's other groups that have done everything from helping low-income families purchase an EV, whether it be new or used. So really getting at that community organizations that understand the challenges and issues so, again, that no community is left behind in this transition. With that, I'll turn it back over.
Thank you so much, Kristen, and it's really wonderful to hear how an organization like General Motors is ensuring that a just transition is part of its growth and strategy. So thank you for that. Now we're going to go further around the world to the Caribbean, where we'd like to showcase how the island of Bermuda is providing clean transport to its citizens. So please do give your attention to this short video message from the Director of Public Transportation from the Government of Bermuda, Mr. Roger Todd. Please play the video.
Hello everyone, my name is Roger Todd and I'm the Director of Bermuda's Department of Public Transportation. I'm glad to be joining this exciting global conversation toward equitable, clean mobility for diverse communities around the world. In Bermuda, our bus system serves the public and school students in their daily commute and tourists visiting our pink sand beaches and vibrant blue waters. 4 years ago, we reached out to RMI to help investigate the ambitious project of electrifying our entire bus system by 2030. We chose to revamp our system for 3 main reasons. 1, to decrease tailpipe emissions, which pollute the local environment. 2, to create a better bus design suitable for our narrow roads and for all patrons through improved accessibility features. And 3, to reduce cost. This April, Bermuda welcomed 30 public buses into service, representing 1/3 of our fleet, and paving the way toward energy independence and a more resilient, clean future. Over the first 6 months, we have measured 20% fuel savings and 45% less carbon emissions. 8 months of fuel savings will be enough to pay for a new electric bus. The streets are quieter, the public is experiencing electric vehicles every day. The first 30 electric buses will save the government 48% or $10 million over the bus's 12-year lifetime. Converting the entire fleet will slash emissions equivalent to removing 1,500 cars off of our roads. In order to avoid the worst impacts of climate change that will be felt the most here in Bermuda and across the region, we must unite to halve global transportation emissions in the next 8 years. Bermuda's level of international ambition and successful cross-sectorial execution represents a model for other island nations, cities, and states around the globe to follow and enjoy the same local benefits to do their part in meeting this goal. I'd like to close by giving a warm thank you to the team at the Department of Public Transportation, RMI, and the Golden Dragon Bus Company. Thank you.
It really is inspiring to see smaller nations that are not primary contributors in emissions take such a strong lead and take such strong action. They're to be commended. Finally, to share an overview on the global clean mobility transition, it's my pleasure to invite from RMI Managing Director Clay Stranger. All yours.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, Heather, Kristen, Nicholas. I want to just reflect on 2, I think, false trade-offs. I think a couple of them have been mentioned already, but the first is this trade-off between compact cities, walkable and bikeable cities, and EVs. And I know many of us in this room are working that both and really is the only way we'll get there. Thank you, ITDP, for putting the actual numbers behind that, arming us with the argument we need to really ensure that both and is the way that we go. The second false trade-off is more specific to EVs and is the trade-off between speed of the transition, and inclusivity of the transition. And I think sometimes it's debated that, like, in order to go fast, we have to just, hit the emissions targets, and that inclusivity is maybe secondary in priority. I think increasingly through our work, it's becoming more apparent to me that inclusivity is actually the requirement for the speed and scale that we need to hit. And so I'm appreciative of the name of this event, Electric Mobility for All. I think it's the for all that will unlock the scale of savings that are possible. Three things, or 3 sort of topics I quickly want to touch on as it relates to that. The first is on 2- and 3-wheelers. The second is on trucks. And the third, Kristen mentioned, is on multi-unit dwellings. On 2- and 3-wheelers, the emissions tail is not huge, but it's significant. And our colleagues at International Council on Clean Transportation have done a lot of the math on this. It shows substantial but small compared to trucks and private cars from an emissions standpoint. My experience working in India and elsewhere has been that 2- and 3-wheelers are actually like the basis of societal and political will and an amazing way to expose people to the fact that electric mobility is actually better in so many ways. It's enabled governments to build sort of ambition behind policies to target heavier duty vehicles with bigger emission tails. And I think there's also maybe a false perception that 2- and 3-wheelers are happening. We hear about them taking off in India, we hear about them taking off in Vietnam. They are happening, but there's a big opportunity for us to push a lot harder and faster. It's my goal, it's our program's goal, that we realize 100% sales by 2030. That's the timeline that we're talking about, and it's doable. We think products are there, we can get there with the manufacturing scale. When we compare that to business as usual, there's 1.5 gigatons available by realizing that versus the current speed for 2- and 3-wheelers. The other thing on 2- and 3-wheelers is there's really this incredible positive ambition loop that we're seeing take place, and I think to the extent that civil society actors have a role to play in that, we can sort of stoke that flywheel to run faster. And that positive ambition loop is the private sector on the one hand saying there's demand for these products and we see shared value, common interest across the board. And where possible, then governments reinforcing that with fiscal incentives like we heard about in Maharashtra. But some of the other policies, just favorable access, creating these particularly in countries without a lot of public funding to be able to directly subsidize. There are so many things that can be done to tilt the balance in favor of 2- and 3-wheelers. The second piece I just want to mention is trucks. If we think about equitable and inclusive transition to electric mobility, trucks are really nasty, and the reality is that respiratory systems all over the world are co-located with tailpipes, and that trucks, for example, in India are less than 2% of the vehicle stock. They're 50% of the particulate emissions, disproportionately contributing to respiratory disease. But there's a lot of challenges in the truck transition. They still cost roughly twice as much in many places. One truck can be about a 3 megawatt load, and so think about an apartment building's power with everything on in the apartment to charge the truck. Think about a depot of trucks as a small municipality if everything's switched on at the same time. So the infrastructure challenge is real, but the priority is also there when you think about just people's health and how disproportionately it affects health. The third is on multi-unit dwellings, like you mentioned, Kristen. Speaking from my own country, half of Americans live in multi-unit dwellings. That means half of Americans don't have a place to charge a car at home necessarily. And I'm sure almost everyone here has heard of the Inflation Reduction Act. One of the core tenets of that is for the first time there's actually a tax credit for used vehicles, $4,000, which is really meaningful in terms of taking the price of a used EV and making it outcompete a used ICE vehicle. 80% of the sales of cars in the United States are secondhand, used vehicles. And so unlocking that is going to be super critical. We don't think we're going to see the demand pull for that used EV tax credit unless we can solve for the other half of our citizens that live in multi-unit dwellings. And so while definitely we're going to work and we need to work on the non-vehicle solutions for those communities as a priority, figuring out community-based charging models, figuring out service-based access models for multi-unit dwellings is going to be crucial. So those are 3 priorities for me, for RMI. I know we have a lot of great partners here helping across the board, getting it done. Thanks for joining us here. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Clay. So we do have a few minutes left, and I'd like to invite our panelists, speakers up to the stage, because I do have a few questions, and I'd like to get into a little bit of a conversation with all of you. So please come and have a seat. So we are short a couple of mics, or can I get a couple more microphones up here? Thank you. So thank you all for sharing your perspectives. And as I mentioned, I would like to go into a little bit of a conversation, short conversation, thank you, on how we can extend access to the benefits and services of electric mobility as quickly and as broadly as possible, because as we know, we don't have a lot of time. So is there anything today that maybe has perhaps been overlooked and wasn't mentioned? What should we perhaps be paying closer attention to? Any of you, open to you.
All right, it looks like I got the mic. I think we talked about a couple things. Infrastructure is extremely important. We're very optimistic with some of the policies, particularly the IRA and the new clean energy tax credits that have been implemented in the U.S. and starting to hear, was on a panel yesterday with other governments, other countries that are talking about similar initiatives as well. And so I think as we look at what it's going to take to get people to transition, I talked about products across every price point and segment, and I know we talked about shared mobility, which is also important, but there's a lot of people that use their personal vehicle for their livelihood. That is how they earn a living and they take care of their family. And so we need to make sure that we're providing products that enable them to do that and that the infrastructure is also there to support them. So I think those two things alone will continue to support the transition.
Thank you.
I realize I talked about public transportation so much, but I didn't specifically talk about buses enough. So really when we're thinking about electrification and public transportation coming together, that can mean trains, and metros are great, and electrifying them is great. But it requires a lot of time and infrastructure to build trains. It's very costly, and most governments really don't have those kind of financial resources. So buses are the most cost-effective investment that we can make in public transportation. And Clay mentioned it a little bit, but really an investment in e-buses is a key strategy. And it's wonderful to see so many countries investing in bus rapid transit systems. BRT systems are really popular around the world. They're building a new BRT system in Cairo. There's some BRT systems elsewhere in Egypt and throughout Africa. And what bus rapid transit systems are is essentially a metro, but using buses instead. So you're probably all familiar with it. You have a protected lane. It's a corridor where no other vehicles can come in, so the buses can run very quickly. They pull up to a station that looks just like a metro station. You board the bus with the doors opening just like they do a train. You buy your ticket beforehand, just like you would with the metro when you enter a station. So in some cities, if they do it really well, you wouldn't even know that you're on a bus. You would think that you're on a metro, on a train, and you can build them in a fraction of the time and a fraction of the money. So you can have that high frequency, great transportation at a much lower cost, much lower speeds, which is what we need for climate action. And we also just need e-buses in general. Beyond having these corridors, in many countries, most people ride on small minibus fleets, informal transit, and we need to move those to electric buses as well. It was great to have two representatives of India, and I think India is a great example of a move to electrification in many ways. And one of them is that one of the challenges is in buying e-buses. It was great to hear that Bermuda has bought 30 buses, but every time a city or a country goes to buy buses, if they're just doing it alone, they're negotiating prices which are not advantageous. But if you can cluster your purchases in a much larger procurement, then your negotiating power increases, your financial structures can be designed to better suit the structure that you're looking for. So India has done an amazing job of putting together their purchasing power with a public-private partnership where the government has essentially said, we want to have a tender of tens of thousands of buses, and then the individual cities can basically enter into financial agreements with that public-private partnership that's operating at the national level. So again, I think e-buses, and thinking about interesting structures that can really, bring down the financial negotiating burden for players that are working at that sub-national level is really key, and there's some great examples out there in the world to follow. So if I hadn't said it enough, e-buses.
Thank you, Heather.
I'll build on that. I think I don't know that it was overlooked because Nicholas mentioned finance, but I just want to like double click on finance and say that is a real barrier, and it's something I think could help us go really fast. And to be specific, like there is a lack of confidence in the asset of electric vehicles that's resulting in some emerging economies of loans for an individual buyer of 30 or 35% for an electric two-wheeler. The total cost of ownership advantage, the savings, the fuel savings aren't great enough to overcome a 35% interest rate on that vehicle. And there are things that can be done. Like 35% is ridiculous. It's sort of understandable because we haven't seen lots of these assets run through their useful life, be resold, have a second life, show that they're going to retain value, that they're going to perform to spec. But for example, interest rate subvention, like the government of Delhi is doing, where they're literally buying down the commercial rate of the interest loan to unlock the ownership advantage. First loss guarantee facilities where blended finance can actually come in and say, we're gonna backstop the failure of any of these vehicles and guarantee the loans. Priority sector lending, where governments can actually signal to banks that that there are certain products or certain asset classes that they will require or recommend or reward a percentage of lending to go against. And so for more finance, more dedicated finance, more low-cost finance to go towards commercial loans for EVs would be a big deal, particularly in the emerging world.
Thank you, Clay.
There's one more thing that we didn't mention, and people probably will think it's one of the most boring thing, but just data, statistics. Every organization, every municipality have some kind of key performance indicators, and those key performance indicators need to include, for example, if it's a public transportation company, not just the number of people they ferry back and forth, but also last and first mile issues and obviously air quality issues and these type of things. And they're quite often they're not there yet. And it would make it much easier for us to do these type of assessments as well on the multiple socioeconomic benefits. What's the real social impact of transitioning to electric mobility?
Well, thank you so much. And I think just keep the microphone with you because I'm going to direct the next question first to you and then you can pass it on. We don't have a lot of time left, so this is the last question for the day. But let's just be hopeful for a change. And let's fast forward 10 years. Okay, so now we are at COP 37. The year is 2032, and it's taking place in my home of Goa, India. So, how do you imagine electric mobility or the mobility ecosystem to be in 10 years from now?
Okay, so I'm going to change your question a little bit and not answer about the ecosystem, but just a personal experience. One of my colleagues in Nairobi, he's built his own electric car. When he comes to school with this electric car, all the dads, actually quite a number of the moms are as well, they're standing around the car, they're like kicking the wheels, and everybody's so excited about that car. So it's new tech. There's a lot of exciting things about it. The Kenyans are like, wait, so there's no tailpipe. People are getting excited about it. By 2030, it's going to be the coolest thing to sit in one of these electric, whether it's a two-wheeler or three-wheeler or four-wheeler. It's happening.
It is happening. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, just to build on that, I would see a large amount of choices from an affordable standpoint. Affordability is going to be extremely key. And I think we'll see the global rollout of autonomous technology, which is also an EV future and really addresses congestion and other issues as well. And so I think as we see that's happening, the reality is it's happening in San Francisco today. You can hail a driverless taxi, and maybe by next year at COP28, you'll be able to do it in Dubai as well, because that's our next region that we've already announced. So pretty exciting.
Thank you, Kristen.
So my dream is maybe a little bit different. I would imagine maybe the dignitaries are rolling up in the private vehicles, but the rest of us are cruising on our electric bicycles. Especially, I'm imagining, the India landscape where most of the people move around on small vehicles. So I could imagine people arriving maybe by walking under green canopies and such an amazing clean streetscape, and people are smelling the wonderful smells of India. But that's something similar that you see all around the world. So people are walking to the venue, but also showing up with a smile because maybe they rode their bike and it was an electric bike. So if it was a little too hot or a little too hilly, they just had the electric assist to help them get there. And they came with a smile. They didn't have to worry about sitting in a chair all day because they already got their exercise on the way there. And if they were tired at the end of the day, then they got an electric bus back to their hotel. Again, there are so many choices. There's all forms of electric mobility, but also, when you're sitting in that bus on the way home, maybe you're rubbing shoulders from somebody that's completely from around the world for you. So not only are you having an electric mobility experience, you're also having an amazing cultural experience, which I think is what public transportation and public space are all about as well. It's about coming together and, again, sharing the benefits of our beautiful world and keeping it that way. So that's my vision.
Thank you, Heather. See you in
Nice.
2032.
I like
Over to you,
that
Clay.
vision. Mine's short, just like a whole generation of children have been born that are never going to ride in, experience internal combustion engines or tailpipes.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us today. That concludes this session. And yes, I hope you have some good takeaways, and thank you all for joining us. Thank you.